And good afternoon and welcome along to another episode of Matchday Live. We're following the Imps up and down the country as they continue their campaign in the League One. What a brilliant start to this campaign it has been for Michael Appleton's side as well. It's a trip to face Accrington Stanley this afternoon, a first league game for Lincoln City in 18 days' time. They could finish the day top of the League One table as well, should results go their way as well. So an action-packed show for you this afternoon. Really delighted to have your company. As always on the show, we'll be looking back against that win for Forest Green Rovers, looking ahead to today's game as well. And we're talking all things retro kits as well. Delighted to say that Gary Hutchinson joins me. Gary, and many happy returns for Thursday. First of all, did you have a good day?
I had a lovely day. Thank you, Sam. Yes, very relaxing. Good
stuff. I won't ask you quite how old you are, but the moustache is looking fine. Are we keeping it into December as well, or is it coming off at the end of November?
It is coming off the minute midnight strikes on November the 30th. My partner can't even look at me at the moment. She dislikes it so much. So it's coming off. But hit the £400 mark last week, so it's for a good cause.
Good stuff indeed. In terms of today's game, Gary, Accrington never an easy place to go, is it?
No, absolutely not. I don't recall us going there and winning. Every time I've been, we've been beaten. They play a nice brand of football. And what they do, they do it on a budget. They do it with the resources that they've got. And there's an element of Keith Alexander's Lincoln about them, not in the style, but in that togetherness, in that the sum is far greater than the parts. So yeah, it's always going to be a tough game, but it's one that we should relish, and I think it'll be a good game of football.
Yeah, absolutely. An 18-day break that I mentioned before, Gary, in terms of certainly league action. How much will that benefit Michael Appleton's squad, do you think?
Well, that certainly helped in terms of getting some bodies back. I mean, we saw Liam Bridcut come back into the side on Tuesday night, which was a huge boost. I know we lost Remy Howarth. I think it also gives Michael time to work with the players on the training pitch. And we've seen it when we've had a prolonged break in the past that we tend to come back very well. And I'm thinking last year, I think it was in December where we had a 2.5 week break and we went and won at Burton. I think then we beat Tranmere. We had a really good run. Yeah, Michael's a coach. First and foremost, I think more over and above being a manager, he works with players, he develops tactics. So I would like to think that the 2.5 weeks would have certainly been spent improving our patterns of play, which is exciting if that's the case.
In terms of Tuesday night, Gary, the Imps snuck past Man City under 21s, didn't they? But it was a good run out for them.
Yeah, it was. I think there was a little bit of rustiness at times, certainly in the first half. But, let's not underestimate this Manchester City side. I know it's their under-21s, but this is the cream of the crop. And when you look back at Chelsea under-21s from when we played them, 2 of those players are now in the England squad. So I think that shows the size of the task that we had. But again, we'll go to the Liam Bridcut. It was a great run out. It was great to get Liam Bridcut back in the side. I think our skipper's hugely important. And I go on about Theo Archibald every week. What composure there to create our goal.
Yeah, I mean, it was brilliant. You love Theo, don't you? And I mean, in terms of that finish from Harry as well, you just expect that from him when he goes into that positions now, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think that we looked better when the first team players began to come on the field. The James Jones and O'Connor McGrandles came on relatively early. And when Harry pushed into his position further down the right-hand side, it seemed to come together. And you see it here, Harry to James Jones in across. Conor McGrandles should have been 2-0, 10 grand top of the group, but for a great save. And then obviously Man City got into it late. But it was just that. It was a workout. Win, lose or draw, we were in the next round. So it was really just a case of getting some minutes into some players and getting some bodies back, I think, as well.
And these things happen, don't they, Gary? This mistake here from Ethan Ross. We saw a fine save from him before. We'll see the penalty save shortly. But this is all part of the learning curve as a young keeper.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt desperately sorry for Ethan because had he not made that slip, nobody would have been talking about his performance. If you make a mistake as a goalkeeper, it's under the microscope because it 9 times out of 10 results in a goal. Obviously, he's made the penalty save here. I think back to games where we played Scunthorpe, and I think Sam Slocum made a penalty save. So this penalty shootout at the end of a draw certainly gives keepers the chance to be heroes in inverted commas, but in a penalty shootout that meant absolutely nothing at all. Ross won't get the plaudits for that. People will just look at the mistake. It happens. He's a good character, and if he gets the games from now on, I think he'll bounce back.
Yeah, and it's a win for the record books. At the end of the day, obviously go and beat Forest Green beforehand, go through against Man City the other night, and then win this afternoon, and all of a sudden we're looking at the records going, well, the Imps have won three in a row, 3 on the spin. So it's not the worst thing, is it?
No, absolutely not. Look, like I said, it was a dead rubber. If we'd lost the game, okay, it wouldn't have looked great on the record books, but it wouldn't have mattered one iota. But it shows that we're competitive in every single game, even games that don't particularly matter. And let's not forget, this is a Man City side or a Manchester City under-21 side that had put 4, I think, past Mansfield and 3 past Scunthorpe or vice versa. So they're no mugs. So actually, for us to put a scratch side out, and there was first team players in there, but it was reorganised, then to lose Remy Howarth as well. I think we actually showed great character against, what I would underline is a team of players who at some point in the future, 50% of those will be in the international game. A couple of them might even be in Man City's first team. There's future household names there. It was a tough game. And I think to come out of it with a draw and win on penalties was credible.
Absolutely, Gary. Good stuff indeed. Plenty more thoughts from Gary Hutchinson throughout the show, no doubt. So I mentioned before that the Imps snuck past the Man City under-21 side. They beat Forest Green Rovers a little bit more comprehensively than that the week before, didn't they? Let's have a look at how they did it now.
Here's Anthony Scully for Lincoln City. Pressing and probing, finding a bit of space for George Grant, and he does have room to run into. He's going to take the shot on, and it's a brilliant effort. Wonderful opening goal from George Grant for Lincoln City. Caught that so sweetly. And again, lofting it longer. And Scully had made the run. He's still going here. And down he goes under the challenge from Kitching, and the referee points to the penalty spot. Grant to step up and to score his and the Imps' second goal of the game, doubling the lead already. Cole Winchester. It's a little short. This is Brennan. All his own work, and he's found the finish coolly into the corner as well to make it 3-0. Brennan Johnson. Really well taken goal. Lincoln City, the League One side, dominant against their League Two visitors here. And in the mood for more, maybe. Again, plenty of space for Scully. Continued his run, and he will get it back. Neat play in the build-up again. It's a really cool finish across the goalkeeper. It's 4-0, and Scully gets in on the act as well. Able to bring it down here. And the cross aimed in towards Whitehouse. Oh, he's got his left boot to that. They've got one back against his former club. Elliot Whitehouse scores for Forest Green Rovers. From fullback is Harry Anderson, trying to get away from Kitching. He has. He's allowed to continue here. He's got options in the middle. Still with Anderson, and there's the strike from Scully. There's another goal, his second of the match. It's 5-1 now. The 2017 quarter-finalists really enjoying themselves in the first round today. Once more it is Anderson trying to catch out the keeper. He couldn't hold it, and it's squeezed in for number 6 by the substitute Jamie Jones. The goals keep coming in stoppage time. So the ball favours Forest Green here. Deep into added time. Cut back for Jake Young, and they might just have had the final say in the scoring. Possibly the last kick of the game from Young. 6-2 now. Well, never in doubt, really, was it, for Michael Appleton's men. Impressive performance as they move into round 2. They've beaten Forest Green Rovers by 6 goals to 2.
Gary, that was quite some performance. The standard of goals was something else, wasn't it? We'll take a more in-depth look at just some of them shortly. But in terms of the performance overall, how impressed were you with Michael Appleton's side there?
Yeah, very much so. I thought Forest Green actually showed the competition quite a bit of disrespect. They played a weakened side, but you beat what's in front of you, and we did that comprehensively. It was a tough opening 20 minutes. I felt Forest Green looked like they'd got something to offer, and George Grant's absolute thunderbolt. Really, from then on, there was only ever going to be one winner. But it was the patterns of play. I think it was the ruthlessness that we showed. We applied the pressure more and more. It might be a temptation when you go 4-0 up to think, well, we've won this game now. But there was none of that at all. It may have been 6-2, but it could have been 7, 8, 9. We were utterly rampant at times. So really, really pleasing and nice to get through. Would have been nice to have got a decent draw in the next round, but we've got another memory against Forest Green that we can roll VT next year.
Absolutely, yeah. Plymouth Argyle up in the next round for the Imps. A long journey, but someone who's even further away is David Johnson, who joins us all the way from Missouri, North America, part of the North American Imps. David, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Hoping the sound's okay where you are. In terms of that win against Forest Green, what a performance by the Imps. What did you make of it? I presume you streamed the game.
Was not able to watch it. It's actually region restricted in America for the FA Cup unless it's televised over here. So I only got to see the highlights. But what a batch of highlights that was, right? Grant's goal, Brendan Johnson's solo goal. That was crazy. It was awesome.
Yeah, if we take a look back at some of those goals now, you mentioned Grant's goal, you mentioned Brendan Johnson's. I mean, David, when George Grant picks the ball up here and brings it, are you thinking shoot there?
He's 1,000% thinking shoot after his first touch. You can see it. I feel like you can tell immediately when he sees the space that he has in front of him that he's 100% putting that behind the keeper.
What about this goal in terms of the movement? I mean, the way that Brendan Johnson takes it, talk us through it.
I would like to point out what great defense that Max Melbourne had right there to create that chance. First off, I think that was something that's a little under appreciated for that goal. As beautiful as the solo goal was from Brendan Johnson with the touches and the skills that he showed, that really was a beautiful setup pass too. I think it was Anderson, I believe, that set that pass up, but Brendan's couple of silky skill moves right around the 18-yard box was great, and the composure on his finish was awesome.
Gary, it's the quality of goals, isn't it? It's the emphatic finishes, it's the build-up play, it's everything that you want as a football fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just to pick up, it was actually Theo Archibald. I can't let an opportunity go miss that set up Brennan's goal, but it was certainly Harry there on the right-hand side. It's like I said, I think it was the tenacity as well. I mean, Anthony Scully's opener was just quality, and I think it was vastly underrated. I mean, how many Lincoln City goals have been scored with double back heels in the area? And we were enjoying ourselves, and footballers who are enjoying themselves and are confident look like they're going to score all the time. If that game had gone on another 10 minutes, as I've said, I think we would have scored more and more goals, as Forest Green tired. But it's the patterns of play, and it came off in that game. And that was the game where often we say, Lincoln are going to hammer someone one of these days. That was the game where it all came off.
And David, just to look ahead to today's game then, I presume you'll at least be able to stream this one. What do you make of Accrington so far this season? It's going to be a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But also, I don't know if you listen to the Stacey West podcast, but Gary did a pretty good rundown of what competition Accrington has played so far this season. And I believe it was 5 wins they have. Or they've played 5 teams in the bottom half. So they haven't really played the competition that we have so far. So I feel like we definitely have the upper hand going into the game. And I feel like we're probably on better form, being that we got the trouncing of Forest Green.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, would you go along with that?
Yeah, I'm flattered that David managed to get a little plug in there for the podcast. Quite right. I think I pointed out Accrington had played 6 of the bottom 9, and they've lost 2 of those games. Look, they're a good side. Let's not make out they're where they are purely because of who they've played. But if you actually took a bigger slice, if we added 3 or 4 games onto that, would they have won as large a percentage? Possibly not. So league positions don't always tell the story at times. It's going to be a tough game. This isn't one of those that you look at it and think it's a gimme. But when you look at the fixture list at the beginning of the season and you aspire to finish in or around the top 6, going to Accrington is something that you shouldn't fear.
David, let's talk about the Lincoln City women's team then, because I know you had a chance to catch up with one of the star players, Mary Cooper. Talk us through how that chat went and how it came about.
Beth reached out to me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Beth, people watching this. She basically is a jack of all trades for the Lincoln City women. She does all the filming, the tweeting, literally anything to do with Lincoln City's women's social media. She's pretty much the person taking care of all that. I'm pretty active on Twitter. You guys probably know that if you follow me. But I was following the live tweeting for the FA Youth Cup, like the women's, anything related to Lincoln City. I'm live tweeting it all the time. I'm not just a fan of the men's club. I'm a fan of the club, the city, the culture, the community, everything about Lincoln. I love it. But so with that being said, I have had several conversations with some of the players and over Twitter with Beth and the manager. So it came about because she's an American. Mary is, I believe, the first American woman. She might be the first full American contract for Lincoln City. I know you guys had Eric Lehigh on loan a few years back, but I don't know if you've ever had the men's team or I know a loan, and I believe we had a youth player. His name is escaping me right now. We released him this year. He had American parents, I believe.
This is where Gary chips in with his knowledge.
Blank. We just released him, not that Adebayo. Yeah, Jordan. So I believe he had either an American parent or grandparent. So he was on FIFA and Football Manager. He is American. Whether he identifies as American, he certainly doesn't speak as one. He definitely has the British accent. But so Mary, I believe, is the first full contracted player for Lincoln City that's American. From Pittsburgh, had a great hour-long conversation with her. You can check that out on YouTube. It was put together by Beth, and we just chatted for an hour about everything from what the women's game is like over here in comparison to what it's like, the routes that players take to play professional football in England for the women, and a lot about food. I currently am doing because of that conversation, I have a weird thing going right now where I'm trying to try beans on toast for the first time. There's a lot of British food that I'm super unfamiliar with. And that came up in the conversation as something that she loves over there. So I thought I would give it a try. Had, 40 interactions with people on Twitter about what I need to do to them. But sorry to get sidetracked. But that conversation was really fun. It was awesome. Really, really interesting insight into the mentality that you have to live abroad at an early or younger age. And try to carve a path in life. Like, it was super interesting.
Bit of HP sauce on your beans on toast, David. You won't go wrong.
It's being delivered today.
Is it? Oh, there you go. Right on cue. It was almost if it was meant to be. Gary, in terms of the women's side, how important is it that this club has a flourishing women's team? Because looking back on some of the results, it's been quite a start to the season for them. I think it's something like 22 goals in 6 games, won 4 out of the last 6 as well. So they're clearly doing things the right way.
Yeah, it's hugely important. Look, I think at one point we had arguably one of the best kind of women's team in the country, went to the FA Cup semi-final, 3,000 watched us play Arsenal, and then they were cruelly snatched away, which I'm not going to go into. The women's game in Lincoln continued to thrive. There were strong teams at Moorlands, at Highcombe, obviously Netland, which became Lincoln City Women. So there was still a thriving women's scene. But to have a women's team connected to a professional club is hugely important for equality, for diversity, and purely just because it's a good thing to have. This isn't a tick in a box. Football is all encompassing. David's a classic example of that. It's not just for the white males of Lincoln. It's for everybody. It's for all people. So to have a women's team, and not just a women's team, not token gesture, but one which was recruited strongly. There's Mary Cooper, Elliot Gilliott, who I think played for England under 23s. Got good players as well. So it's really nice to see them doing well, and fingers crossed that continues.
Good stuff, Gary. David, let's leave the final word on this part for you then. A score prediction today and scorer.
My gut says 2-1, and I'll go Grant and Hopper because I feel like pressure's on Hopper, and I feel like he's gonna perform today.
There you go, love it, David. Great to hear your thoughts this afternoon. Do enjoy the game. We know that you follow the Imps far and wide and watch them whenever you can. So really appreciate your thoughts there in Missouri. That's David Johnson. You can follow him on Twitter at Imps_NA. For the North American
have a good day. Happy belated birthday, Gary.
Thank you, David. Cheers, mate.
Bye.
Good to the thoughts of David Johnson there. Right, let's go to a quick advert break now. We'll be back in the next 30 seconds or so. There you go, about 30 seconds, 20 seconds maybe. As Jeff Stelling says on Soccer Saturday, 40 seconds, you can count them. I think it was something like that. But anyway, let's move on. Today marks a debut of sorts for Lincoln City. Not a player, but a kit. It's the first time that they'll be playing in this season's third shirt. The shirt actually was all part of the Calm campaign, the campaign against living miserably. It's something that will feature on the Imps third shirt for the 2020-21 season. It was a space kindly donated by LNER as well. So much appreciated for LNER for doing that as well. And Gary, I'll ask you, in terms of the shirt itself, what are your thoughts on it? From my perspective, I quite like it.
Yeah, I do too. I think the club do really well with third kits and away kits now. I think there's a strong design process behind their kits. Speaking to Liam Scully in the past, he's always been really firm on having a pub shirt, which is something you can wear with jeans and it's not too garish and not too obvious. And then there's the third kit, which last year was the blue with the Lincolnshire flag and this year's the green. Both, I think, not understated, but just subtle enough to be a cross between a pub shirt and a loud football shirt. I think we've done well. I think we've done well.
I'm pleased to say that Gavin Hope joins us. I believe that he's joining us perhaps on the phone. Not sure if he's joining us via video link or not, but Gavin's with us. There he is. There we can see him. Gavin, great to have you on board.
Hey, good afternoon.
Great to see you. You've got a few behind you as well. Yeah. Talk us through them.
Yeah, I've got a few. Lincoln City is I'm not a Lincoln City supporter, but it's a huge club in my family. My dad is been a supporter for 50, nearly 60 years, is a gold member, is often at the games and that. So I got a lot of love for Lincoln through my dad. And over that, I've had interest in the shirts and that collected a few as and when they've come up. So you can see a few behind me there. One, that way. That's the Millennium Stadium special shirt, although not the kit they wore in the actual game. This was it's got this special embroidery for the playoff final in 2003. Also got the 125-year anniversary Lincoln Green kit, and got my name in there as well. So got my dad and my brothers in there. So good, and then a couple of older away kits from the mid-2000s, an Umbro one and a Usport one.
Love it. Quite a collection there. Gary, I can see you're licking your lips. It's certainly whet the appetite for today's game, hasn't it, Gary? In terms of you're doing a World Cup of kits on your blog as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am. So I've been looking at all of the away kits, or as many as I can possibly get, putting them in World Cup groups, getting people to vote. I've got a couple here to show you, Sam, as well, if you can indulge me a moment. There was the group stages ended this morning. This classic from 96-97 is now qualified for the next round. That's split opinion. This kit, which I've already mentioned was last year's third kit, has received more votes in its group than any other kit thus far. So that's a real favourite. This classic, which was the year after the Millennium Stadium 2003, has also done well. And one which hasn't been voted on yet, but I'm tipping this as an outsider, 98-99 And if there are any Scottish football fans who like one half of Glasgow, that's going to do really well. And just a word on the two shirts that Gavin had there, the 125 anniversary. I think if he looks closely, my name's on there too. And also the Millennium Stadium one was quite rare. I didn't think it was sold outside the ground before the playoff final. I think that's where I bought mine.
It's quite a collection there, Gav, as well. Any of Gary's that you wouldn't mind getting your hands on there?
Oh, I'd love that Blue Admiral one. That is an absolute classic. Yeah, I love that shirt. Yeah, I've been looking at the World Cup. It's a really interesting format. It's good to see the amount of kits on show. And also one thing with Lincoln, which is quite unique, I think, with a lot of clubs, is the variety of colours used in the away kits. It's great to see. I do like a variation, classic Lincoln kit, red and white stripes, although, there has been varieties of that over the years. But that palette of away colours and away kits used over the years gives it a real kind of vibrant and keeps it really in touch. And I know Gary mentioned that third kit from last year. That was an absolute classic, a beautiful kit, a lovely kind of nod to the Lincoln flag as well with that.
Gavin, it seems like now more so than ever, classic kits, retro kits, even current kits are more desired by fans. Is that the case? Is that something you've found on your blog?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the thing is the kit cycle, from, we look back at the 70s and into the 80s, the kit cycle was very, you didn't change your kits very often. You kept your kits, in some cases 5-6 years. Nowadays, you see such a turnaround that I don't think people can keep up. So people actually go back to the retro stuff. People enjoy that classic look. And, when you look at, obviously at the moment we can't look at crowds. So when you look at crowds and stadiums, you'll see kits from 70s up to kind of the current time, and that vast array and view of kits is just something that people love to see. And I think that becomes a huge discussion point, and the various things and the little tweaks here and there. And Lincoln is great at this, and this is where they've tweaked the home kit every now and again. They've had a quartered shirt in the late 90s. They've used more of a solid red with the white red band, Nike band, I think early 2010 2011, somewhere around there. So those little touches and variants, I think, keep everything in place. And in reality, people are keen and understanding of what is important for them from a kit point of view.
And you mentioned that green one that you've got there. Obviously, it's a green one that's on debut on show today away at Accrington. What have you made of this one?
Yeah, it's a great kit. It's a classic. The kits that they've produced with Area have been, been really great. And seeing this vibrant green actually gives not just a good visible look and something that people will wear, but actually a really nice contrast to what we've got with the home kit and the black away kit. It's something different. It stands out. And, green is fairly, synonymous with Lincoln green. So it ties in nicely with the club as well. And, you mentioned there with the charity touch as well. There's, it's hitting the market from all angles. There's all different ways you can look at it, but it is a great kit, and I'm looking forward to seeing it being used today at Accrington.
Absolutely. Gavin, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. It's at Kit Geek. You can see it there as well. Thanks ever so much for coming on. We'll have to get you on throughout the course of the season as well, Gavin. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thought of Gavin Hope there. Right, coming up to 2 o'clock. Before then, we're going to go to a very quick break. Back shortly. And right on cue, it is now 2 o'clock, which means one thing and one thing only. It's time for today's team news. So then, Michael Appleton makes none other than 6 changes to the side that beat Manchester City on penalties in the midweek. Alex Palmer comes back into the side. It is then TJ Ioma, Lewis Monsma's back in. Adam Jackson's there. Max Melbourne as well make up the back four. Liam Bridcut is today's captain. Played ever so well the other night, didn't he? Conor McGrandles, James Jones in as well. Then it is George Grant, Harry Anderson and Tom Hopper make up that front three. It is then Long, Eden, Scully, Archibald, Johnson, Robbie Gotts and Sean Rowan on the bench. 6 changes that Michael Appleton makes to today's starting lineup against Accrington. Stanley, Gary, I'll come straight to you then. Your thoughts on today's starting lineup?
First of all, obviously, it's massive to have the captain back. Liam Bridcut, I thought he had a great hour against Manchester City. He's going to be hugely important. It's as close to a first team as I think you can get. I know there's an argument for maybe Walsh and Jackson. But looking at it, it's what I would consider to be our first choice left back, and we've probably had to rotate Eden and Rowan quite a bit there. So I would expect that back four, if they stay injury free, probably to be relatively settled through the next 5, 6, 7 games. The central midfield's got a really familiar look. I mean, James Jones, I think, is a player. Every time he's come on late in games, I think he's affected it really well. Thought he was excellent against Forest Green. Thought he was excellent against Man City in his brief cameo. We look light up front in terms of injuries. Obviously, Morton and Jamie Sewell, but obviously Tom Hopper was meant to be first choice. And when you look at the bench in the latter stages, if the Accrington defence does begin to tire, Theo Archibald and Brennan Johnson both on the bench, both full of pace and running. So we've got plenty to offer there. Surprised that Johnson's on the bench. Don't know if maybe he had a knock because he missed the midweek game for Wales. I would imagine that if he was fully fit or wasn't tired from international duty, he might have started.
Gary, I've got to mention Lewis Monsma as well. How big is it to have him back in the side?
Yeah, it's fantastic. He's become something of an icon, I think, hasn't he, for us? Something, there was question marks for me when he first signed as to how quickly will the boy settle. And I mean, the answer was he settled like snow, to coin a phrase from Bangkok last year. It was just instant. He was been phenomenal. Did we miss him? Potentially, yes. I think central defence is where we've actually got quite a few options, and you can just about get through by moving Ioma or Rowan and players around. But there's little doubt that if Monsma's fit, he plays. We know he offers a threat in the other box, and I think set pieces are something that we can look to exploit more. So it's great to see him back. And anybody who likes first goal scorer markets will be delighted to see him back in the side.
Absolutely. Andrew Hammond says, great team. Good to see some returners. Scott Connery says, yes, strong team lineup today. Jake Tong says, good to see Lewis and Liam back in. Brennan off the bench if we need a goal could be really handy as well. Paul Allison says, we'll rotate Jackson at the back with 3 games this week. And yeah, that's a really good point. It feels like a long time ago, doesn't it, Gary, that the Imps last played in a league match, but now all of a sudden we're back to that sort of midweek, then weekend sort of rotational aspect of it. And it's going to be important to have a fully fit squad.
Yeah, it's hugely critical going forward now till Christmas. I think there's Sunderland in the next run of games, but every single game from now till Christmas, you would fancy us to be beyond competitive. And when I say that, people might say, well, we should be in every game, but your Charltons, your Portsmouths are tough games where you wouldn't be entirely disappointed if you lost narrowly because of the calibre of the opposition. I think it's also important, let's point out Harry Anderson here, because Harry Anderson played obviously Forest Green. I think he played 90 minutes against Manchester City. He's been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there was the moment against Manchester City where the fullback tried to bully him off the ball, and he just stood there like a brick wall and got beyond him and got across him. For me, Anderson's severely pushing Grant for an early front runner for Player of the Year, certainly up to this point in the season. And I just wonder if maybe 3 games in a week, Anderson is a player that's entirely up to that as well.
Steve O'Dare says, about as strong as we can get today. Not sure anyone knows who should be at left back. I mean, for good reason, though, I guess, Gary, on that point, because it's not often, is it, that you see a side sort of blessed with options at left back or right back or those sorts of positions. Here, we're having players come into this position and take to it like a duck to water every single week. There has been no weak link here. Quite strange, but it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I shout Melbourne because Theo Eden by trade would probably call himself a central midfielder. He's played very well at left back. He can fill in there, but I think he's a central midfielder. Sean Rowan would argue that he's a left-sided central defender and has played well at left back. Whereas with Max Melbourne, I think you look at his athleticism, you look at his style of play. He's probably a left back who can play left centre back. So I think probably in terms of out and out left backs, he's the only one at the club. So I'd call him as first choice. I think it's been good, obviously, this break that we've had for him to get some minutes under his belt as well. I think he, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Forest Green was his first game back. So it's great to see what I think is going to be a settled back four bar rotation. Interesting point about Adam Jackson and the 3 games in the week. Obviously, we have the option to put Ioma into Jackson's position, and then Harry Anderson or Robbie Gotts at right back, which fits into that flexibility. Flexibility is all well and good, but you need to know what your strongest starting 11 is, and I think this is as close to it, probably bar Brennan Johnson, as you get.
Interesting stuff indeed, Gary. We're going to get the thoughts of Michael Appleton shortly. Tom Hopper is one of the names on today's team sheet for Michael Appleton. This is what he had to say, speaking at the Sober Lincoln EPC earlier this week.
So it's going to be a fun week. Obviously, Saturday starts with Saturday, so that is where our focus will be fully on. Which will be a tough game on Saturday. It's what I'm looking forward to. Obviously I played at the Lincoln last season, and it was a result that went against us in quite a sort of mad game, and so it's something we want to sort of try and put right. It's always a difficult place to go, Accrington. They've started off really well as well, so they'll be a tough side to come up against. We're working hard, and like you say, it's first of a busy week and a busy month. To be honest, there's lots of games coming up.
And it was a frenetic game from my memory last season. You, as a team, took the lead, I think, 3 times and ultimately lost it. But you're a very different group of players now compared to them. Yeah,
no, definitely. We're a very different team. But it's still, I think, if we can use that sort of experience for the lads that were there and channel it in a positive way, then there's no reason why we can't do that. And I'm sure they'll remember it as well, so it'll give them something. Bit of bite, and it's going to be a good game hopefully. So I'm really looking forward to it.
And they're on a good run of results at the moment, and they're a club for me that they're a relatively small club, but they make the most of what they have in terms of geography and recruiting players.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you say, in terms of maybe small clubs, I wouldn't class them as a small club. They've been doing it in League One for a while now, but they use the like you say, small stadium potentially to their advantages. So it's like I said, it's a difficult place to go. Change rooms aren't the nicest. So we've just got to try and put that out of our minds. And when we're on the pitch, it's business as usual.
Yeah, Tom Hopper there speaking to BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Michael Horton. And Gary, he speaks well every time we listen to Tom Hopper speak. He's a good representative of the club, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. He's one of the senior professionals. I think he's had the sort of career trajectory that has made him into a more rounded and grounded individual, almost certainly. He's our starting number 9. I'd just love to see him just add a couple more goals to that tally at the moment. I mean, he's a hard-working player. You pick him up in the channels, he drops really deep to get the ball. But there were some some crosses from Theo Archibald in midweek, which were just tempting in that kind of alley between the keeper and the back 4. And if Hopper can just find that a couple of goals, I think that he could be a huge player for us on the field as he is off the field.
Richard Godson says Tom Hopper's giving Gaz a run for his money on the Movember front. Yeah, I should say, Richard, that quite a few of the Imps players, like Gary, are supporting Movember, so doing great stuff on that front. But yeah, Tom Hopper rocking the moustache, not quite up to Gary's level just yet, but he's doing a fine job. Okay, let's now get the thoughts of Michael Appleton. This is what he had to say, speaking at the Soper VPC earlier as well this week.
It surprised me, like looking at the squad. I'm a little bit jealous, if I'm being honest, because you look at the list of the squad and they've got over 30 players in the squad, which I suppose going into a period that we're going to go into December, they look better equipped than we do. So listen, John does a fantastic job at Accrington, and it's very similar to how I mentioned a few weeks back. I can't remember which club I was talking about, but there's a real togetherness about the club. You can tell it's almost us against the world, and they play without any fear. There's no pressure on them to do particularly well in the league or finish in a certain position. And I think that just gives them sometimes that little bit of freedom that you need to go and win games.
A result aside, it was a dramatic game last time you played them, just before the lockdown at Accrington. I'm sure as a manager you wouldn't want a game with perhaps that lack of control that there was that afternoon this Saturday.
No, yeah, I mean, it was crazy, but it was a completely different team. I think this group is completely different to the one that sort of went on the field last time out. I think the biggest disappointment last time out was, to go ahead. We went ahead 3 times in a game and still lost it. So that's not a sign of a group that's got a particularly strong mentality. So, this time around, I'd like to think that if we do go ahead in the game, yes, once that can happen and you can lose the game 2-1 or whatever it may be, but not 3 times, and I'll be bitterly disappointed if that ever happened again.
And finally, for me, start of a really tough week, 1,200 miles. You've talked about that before. A lot of travelling for your players, and a lot being expected of your players in the next week.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult, like super difficult. I'm looking at the board here as we're speaking. We've barely got a squad fit for tomorrow in terms of numbers. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to fill my bench. That's how low we are. So to do that, travelling on the back of having limited numbers, and then looking at next month's fixtures, like I've already mentioned, I think, from the Wigan game on the 1st of December to the Hull game, there's 9 games in 29 days. So a little bit daunting, but at the same time, it's quite exciting as well, because there's nothing better than playing games.
Well, Gary, let's start with that then. 9 games in 29 days. It really does bring it home, doesn't it? And when Michael's talking about the squad depth there and maybe comparing it to Accrington as well, it's a bit of a reality check, I would guess.
It is. Squad depth is one thing, but it's quality over quantity as well, I would argue. Pound for pound, do we have a better squad? Not for me to say, but we've certainly got a good squad. We've certainly got that flexibility, which I think is how Michael wanted to fill the gaps. Let's not forget he had a 40% budget cut from last season. So I think he's done a phenomenal job to assemble the squad that we've got. As you say, 9 games in 29 days is a big ask. When you look at some of those games, they're tough challenges, but winning breeds confidence. If you go into that month on the back of a couple of wins, those players are going to want to get out on the pitch every single week, because if you win on a Saturday, you want to be out on the Tuesday and winning again. And aside from Hull and potentially Sunderland, I think there are a lot of games in there that, dare I say, are winnable. The teams in the bottom 9, and you only need to win 3 games in a week to make a serious difference to your season. 9 points over 3 games can really elevate you. And at this stage, it can be the difference between a bottom half finish and just looking over your shoulder, and maybe even looking up and wondering if we can go for promotion. So it's a crucial period for the club.
He mentioned, Gary, that crazy game from last season, which we will take a look back at shortly when we get a view from the opposition camp as well. But in terms of the mentality that Michael referred to there, he said, look, it was a different team on paper, but mentally a different team as well. He was quick to point that out, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I think if we remember back, I think one player maybe scored an own goal that day. I think maybe even gave a penalty away as well. I think it was a very tough afternoon. There was a player that certainly didn't play for the club again afterwards, despite scoring. And I'm not one to dig players out. I think last season when we played Accrington, it was still very much a workman using another workman's tools. I think that the players had the right attitude under a certain regime, and that went away. So we've now got Michael Appleton's team, Michael Appleton's mentality, and I think that makes a big difference. One man's trash is another man's treasure, and Michael's filled his chest with treasure this season.
Good stuff. Yeah, easy for you to say. Right, we're going to be getting a view from the opposition camp shortly. I'll put pressure on myself there to get my words out, haven't I? We're going to be getting a view from the opposition camp shortly. A member of the Raw Milk podcast is going to be joining us. Before then, let's go to a very quick break. Welcome back to Matchday Live, looking ahead to Lincoln City's game away at Accrington. Stanley, delighted to say now that Callum Gibson from the Raw Milk podcast joins us. Callum, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. We've talked a little bit, you may have heard about Accrington there. From your perspective, how would you sum up your side's start to the season?
Yeah, I think it's gone really well. It's gone. I'm the ultimate pessimist, you see. So at the start of every season, I will take 5th bottom on goal difference, snap your hand off. But we won the last 3 clean sheets, which is unheard of in these parts. Clean sheets for a swear word in Accrington, and whisper it quietly, but we're ticking over nicely. Yeah, I'm pleased.
A good recent record as well. Talk to us about some of your wins this season. I mean, it started off brilliantly, didn't it? That win against Peterborough, win to 0. You're keeping a lot of clean sheets at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's testament to a lot of the players that the manager's shown faith in. So if we started the season with a young 19-year-old goalkeeper called Toby Savin, and even the most optimistic supporters would have seen that as a stopgap, really. But he's played so well that we've got a keeper on loan from Chelsea, Nathan Baxter, and young Toby's still keeping out the side. We've been a bit uneasy at times because we started playing a 3-5-2, which is new to a lot of the team. And we do get caught sometimes at the back trying to play out. But it seems to have gelled really quickly. And we do look a tight unit. Yeah, it's going well.
Hi, Callum. I was quite interested. You talked there about one loanee you've got from Chelsea. Another one's caught my eye, John Russell. What should Lincoln fans be looking out for from him today?
Oh, John Russell's an absolute Rolls Royce. It's a bit of a coup for us to get him, really. Anthony Barry, who's the Chelsea youth coach, he was actually a conference winner for Stanley, so I think he's doing us a few favours there. But he's got a great engine on him, box-to-box lad. Good pair of shooting boots as well. Scored a great finish at Northampton the other week. And he's one of those players you can tell as he settles he'll get better, and you can tell he'll probably go on to bigger and better things than League One. But yeah, danger man for sure, as you say.
What about John Coleman then, Callum? Because he's obviously a club legend, with you between, looking at my notes, 99 to 2012, back with you from 2014. It's quite some job that he's doing, and he's really solidified you now as a League One side, not just an EFL side. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think an EFL side will ever see the like again, to be honest. To go from Division 7 to Division 3 in old money on a budget that would make Buttons look generous. He walks on water around here. You know, he is the club in a way. As you say, he went to a few other clubs. It didn't go so well for him, but he just seems a good fit for Accrington. He's got the nous to find these young gems, these young non-league players. And he just has a knack for, as Michael Appleton said before, he was touching on sort of the siege mentality that we have. He just has that way of creating a bond between the players and the supporters and the management and making us hard to beat. And he's one of those, really, where you do fear for the day he eventually packs in, because he's done so much for the club and by proxy the town. So yeah, we call him football genius, and he is.
Gary mentioned John Russell. In terms of other standout players, other players that Imps fans can keep an eye on, and I follow this afternoon, who are we talking?
Yeah, so we lost Jordan Clark to Luton before the season started, and that was a big loss. And we also lost the right back Callum Johnson, so they had a really good understanding. But because of their departure, Joe Pritchard is playing a lot more, and he's the sort of the Accringtonian Pirlo. Great player, again, great engine, takes a great set piece. It just seems to make things tick. Things seem to go through in that sort of playmaker role. So I'd say Joe Pritchard in the middle of the park is one to keep quiet if you want to get anything from the Crown Ground today. And
Gary, that was a player that you flagged up as well, Joe Pritchard. So he's clearly is one to watch, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, I like Pritchard.
Absolutely superb.
There you go. Well, Callum, what did you mention about? That's one of your most succinct answers yet, Gary. What have you made about the Imps so far this season, then, Callum? Can Callum hear us?
I think this is a big test for us. So we've had 2 wins in the week. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are we there?
We are.
Yeah, we're good to go. So a few of us have been saying that we beat, obviously, Swindon and Northampton, but this is a different kind of test, really. You started the season well. You were 5th the last time I looked at the table. Always a tough side to beat. Always a good barometer of where you're at.
Oh, I think we might just have lost Callum there. We'll try and get Callum back. There's live pictures of the WAM Stadium. That may well be why we've lost him, because we've come live into the WAM Stadium. But we'll see about getting Callum back. Gary, as the teams are warming up there, I'm just going to ask you about last season's game, because seeing pictures of the WAM Stadium there brings it back a little bit, doesn't it? That it was that 4-3. It was a game of sheer madness, really.
Yeah, it was, and seeing the ground there as well, it just reminds me of what an unhappy hunting ground it actually is. People talk about the ground and they talk about the changing rooms. Tom mentioned it there, that it's, people say small club, but that's doing them a great disservice. And I think that they've always got character. People talk about us giving away a three times the advantage, but let's flip it onto the other side. And Accrington actually came back from being down 3 times to win the game. It's got down to John Coleman. I mean, they just have this fantastic mentality. They're a team that I admire for what they achieve on the budget that they have. I'm not going to talk disparagingly about the stadium, because when you get to this level, they've earned the right to be here. They've not bought the right to be here like arguably 1 or 2 smaller teams have in the past. And I think that deserves a huge amount of respect. And that goes all the way up to the chairman, Andy Holt, who I know is a divisive character for some. But as I understand, he's loved in those parts as well. And I love following him on Twitter because he's very grounded and down to earth.
Callum from the Raw Milk fanzine is back with us, so we'll give it another go. And Callum, if you can hear us okay, what we're going to do is we're going to play pictures of that game last season, much to your delight, no doubt. But I mean, look, from a footballing perspective, from a neutral perspective at least, it was quite some game. So maybe just talk us through your memories of that, if you can hear us all right.
Yeah, I mean that game last season, 4-3, absolute cracker. One of the games of the season for us, probably one to forget for yourself. And again, the chap we talked about a moment ago, Joe Pritchard, I seem to recall him scoring a bit of a spectacular goal in that game as well. So it bodes well for today.
We've actually brought in, this is complete accident.
I'll take a point, to be honest. I think Lincoln are a good side.
We've actually brought in the home game. First of all, Callum. So what we'll do is, we didn't mean to do that, but we will come on to the 4-3 very shortly. But I don't know if you can recall this one. Certainly from an Imps perspective, Gary, the atmosphere was quite something.
Yeah, it's. I don't know if you can hear me, but it seems to be breaking in and out.
No problem. Let's bring us back.
Can you hear me now?
We're having a few technical difficulties. One of the reasons is that, look, we try and beat the Wi-Fi whenever we can on this show. Charlie, our director, doing a brilliant job as always, but he is live himself from the WAM Stadium, so we're doing our best with the connection for that. Great to the thoughts of Callum. I'm going to bring Gary back into it if I can, see if I can do a bit of self-directing myself. Gary, I mean, we saw pictures there. I feel sorry for Callum slightly because we were asking him about his own side's victory, and then we've made him talk over pictures of a Lincoln City victory. But the atmosphere really stood out from the LNER going back to what was the start of last season.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. As I was saying, it was the first time we'd been in the third tier at the time. It was the first game back. It was, we were packed full of optimism and hope. An awful lot has changed since then, but that positivity and that hope hasn't. I think we've progressed immensely, and people perhaps didn't think we would see that rate of progression. The style of football has changed. But just hearing those sounds, seeing those goals, feeling and remembering the celebrations just makes it harder. And we talk about it every single week about fans being back in the ground, and obviously we're not. And when you see scenes like that, it just hits home how much you miss it, even for what was, a relatively straightforward and standard game.
Yeah, and in terms of the WAM Stadium itself, Gary, I brought pictures back in there. You can see the Imps. In terms of their lineup, I mean, for people that are just tuning in now, just remind us of some of the key changes, 6 changes that Michael Appleton has made there. Max Melbourne at left back is one of them. Liam Bridcut back in as captain. You alluded to him before, but how good was he against Manchester City, and how big is it to have him back?
Considering he hadn't played for a couple of weeks, I thought he was very good against Man City. He didn't put all that many balls astray. Play was meant to go through him. And I actually believe that in the early stages of this season, we haven't seen the best of Liam Bridcut. Remember, he was injured at the beginning of the season. He eased his way back in. But if you look back, there are very few occasions where people have said Bridcut was man of the match, but he has that potential. So I think if we can keep him fit, and on the field, he can influence the play. But let's not understate the influence of just having him there. He's the leader. He's the captain. Michael Appleton has told me in the past about when he walks into a room, everybody just lifts their game. Even if they're on a running machine, they try that a little bit harder because Liam Bridcut's come in. So to have a player of that influence on the pitch is hugely, hugely important.
Absolutely. Right. I'm going to run through the team news if I can. So hopefully you can hear me okay. But it is Alex Palmer in goal, TJ Omer, Lewis Monsma, Adam Jackson, Max Melbourne. The aforementioned Liam Bridcut is back as captain today. Conor McGrandles, James Jones, George Grant, Harry Anderson and Tom Hopper. It is then Long, Eden, Scully, Archibald, Johnson, Gotts and Rowan. And Gary, a couple of the comments that are coming in are just questioning perhaps why Brennan Johnson is on the bench. I mean, I think it's fair to say we don't quite know the reason behind that. My guess, having listened to Michael Appleton just then, would be that there are just so many games coming up now that he has to make big decisions. And look, at the end of the day, it's not a bad call, is it, when you've got the likes of George Grant, Harry Anderson and Tom Hopper up front? We know how interchangeable George Grant can be as well. So is that perhaps the thinking behind Michael's decision?
Possibly. My gut feeling would be that he's not quite 100%. As I've said, I know he missed out on the squad for Wales's midweek game against Finland. He had made his Wales debut before that. I think a fully fit Brennan Johnson plays today. I think a fully fit Brennan Johnson probably plays at number 9 and Tom Hopper sits out. Certainly seeing as Hops played in midweek as well. So I would wonder if that might be the case. I don't know, and if I've missed any news on a press conference, then my apologies. But again, when you look at the bench and you look at that pace, if you've got an 85% Brennan Johnson for 20 minutes at the end of the game, it's going to make the end of the game very, very tough for Accrington. It's the same with Theo Archibald. You've got two players there who, when they come on, are going to get the ball and they are going to run at you. With Accrington going to 3 at the back, I know they've kept 3 clean sheets. Callum said that was unheard of. Well, if that's unheard of, 4 clean sheets sounds highly unlikely to me. Back Lincoln to score today. I'm not making a score prediction, but back us to get a goal, potentially in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, it could all set for to be quite a brilliant game, couldn't it? Because we know that Accrington, from what Callum Gibson was saying before there, from looking at their results and speaking to opposition fans, they do play excellent football. So it really could be quite the spectacle on iFollow this afternoon. Let's go to a very quick break. We'll be back very shortly. Yeah, welcome back. And whilst we're on the subjects of adverts, I must mention the Fans Player Scheme. They've got a competition on this afternoon, so do head over to the FPS Facebook page. Take part in today's score predictions. You've got around about 32 minutes to do so. The winner will get a pair of new Lincoln City mugs. So, do go to the FPS Facebook page. Left of the show then, and just a couple of housekeeping things to remind you about or talk about. I want to mention the FA Cup and the youth team, because what a brilliant result again for the Lincoln City youth side into now the third round of the FA Cup, I believe, having beaten Oldham yesterday, and they're going to be playing Preston in the next round.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we talk about youth on this programme quite a lot. We talked about Sean Rowan. When you look, I think it was Wednesday, we beat Oldham 1-0. Hayden Cann was the captain. He's been in the first team this season. Sam Long has been on the bench. He was in goal. And then we've got a good, strong youth setup. They get better by playing competitive, highly competitive matches. And the youth game is interesting because, in actual fact, their league position probably many fans will kind of glance at occasionally and go, yeah, well done. But the FA Cup is a headline writer for them. And the more they progress, the more that kind of pushes them into the limelight with supporters. And some of those players, again, we could well see in and around the first team next season. So, yeah, really good for the youngsters.
Gary, great to have your thoughts on the show as ever, and do enjoy the remainder of your birthday weekend as well. Look forward to seeing you in the week, no doubt. That's the thoughts of Gary Hutchinson. Enjoy the game.
Thank you very much.
So, Gary Hutchinson, of course, you can read his stuff now on the Stacey West blog, and of course he's available on Twitter as well. Right, we are at 2:30, half an hour away from today's kickoff. So if you go to www.weareimps.com/iFollow, you can purchase your match pass for today's game. All the build-up is live now with Michael Horton and Steve Thompson as well. Fingers crossed the Imps get another 3 points this afternoon. They may well finish today top of League One if a few results go their way. Who knows? Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you later.